Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We are starting at a new Mishnah toward the top of Mem Aleph Amud Beis. I know we're a little bit off kilter in regards to where we've been taking our breaks, but all of that is because I'm unavailable tomorrow. No shiur at all tomorrow. We will be learning today up until the end of the parak, which is approximately till tomorrow's daf, and then Thursday night we'll be learning starting at the new parak, a clean start. So let's start at the new Mishnah. Today's daf is about 50 times easier than last night's daf, maybe 100, as we've been chatting about all of the halachos of Shvius that we know little about. But this Mishnah is very, very relatable and extremely halacha l'maisa. So let's get started. The Mishnah reads about 10, 12 lines down, Mem Aleph Amud Beis. Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shechal Yos B'Shabbos. If the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, one should make sure, and it doesn't say this in the Mishnah, but it means that prior to Shabbos Yantiv, that one should bring their lulavim and esrogim to the shul. The next morning, the next morning, everyone should show up, and they should take their own lulav and esrog, and everyone needs to know that it's their own. Why do we say makir es shelo v'notlo? It's not because we don't want to accidentally switch, but rather, as we will see soon, because mipnei she'amru chachamim ein adam yotze yidei chavasu b'yom tov rishon belulav shel chavero. We normally have an assumption in halacha that avid inish leme'ebad mitzvah b'mamonin. Let's say I can't find my tefillin, or let's say I'm 5 minutes shy of shki and I haven't put on tefillin yet, and I see your tefillin. I know you're a righty, your head's about the same size as mine, but you're not there to ask. So there we say that's not a problem. You're allowed to use somebody else's tefillin. But when it comes to lulav and esrog, the halacha is that we have a din of lachem. We have a din that it has to actually be yours, and it can't be that you're borrowing someone's tefillin. You can't borrow someone's lulav and esrog on day one. That doesn't work because of the din of lachem, as we will see. And therefore, one had to be makir es shelo v'notlo. You had to know which one was yours. The sha'ari mosachag, from days 2 until the end of chag, adam yotze yedei chavaso v'lulavo shel chaver. But on future days, there is no din of lachem. On days 2 through 7, as it relates to Sukkot, there is no concern. You can use someone else's esrog 1/3 of the way down, Mem Aleph Amud Beis, a few lines before the end of the Mishnah. That's din number 1, is that one must make sure to use their own lulav and esrog on the first day of Yantiv. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag Shechal Yos B'Shabbos. If you have a case scenario where the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, v'shachach v'hotzi es halulav l'reshus harabim, and in your brain just totally slipped, and you carried out your lulav and esrog into a reshus harabim. So what's the halacha? Halacha is your pater. Wow. Why would you be pater? You carried something that was the requisite shiur. You carried something in a real reshus harabim. Why are you not chayav? So it says the Mishnah, a very uniquely worded line, mipnei shehotzio bereshus, because you took it out of your reshus hayachid into a reshus harabim bereshus. Now, if you read the words at face value, it seems like it was mutter bereshus, right? It seems like you're allowed. So Rashi clears that up because that's certainly not true. A quarter of the way down in the Rashis, dibur hamaschil shehotzio bereshus. Rashi says, what was your mindset when you took it out? It was bereshus mitzvah. What you were thinking about was lulav and esrog. You were so swallowed by the idea of fulfilling the mitzvah. You were tarud, like we've seen previously about a chasen and other case scenarios where one is tarud b'mitzvah. So here Rashi says bereshus mitzvah shahaya tarud b'mitzvah umechashev ve'asuk umemaher la'asosa umitoch kach ta v'shachach shehu Shabbos. What do we see here? That this was really a shogeg. The shogeg was you had a shikha, you forgot that it was Shabbos because you were tarud b'mitzvah. Rashi continues, the kasava Reb Yossi, ta b'dvar mitzvah v'shagag b'dvar kares patar mikorban. Reb Yossi in our Mishnah, the second din of our Mishnah, holds that if one was toeh, if you made a mistake while trying to do a mitzvah, and in the process you were shagag b'dvar kares, you inadvertently did something that otherwise could have earned someone the punishment of kares. So he says under those cases, one is pater mikorban, and that is in fact our Mishnah. Pater means you're pater mikorban, end of the Mishnah. Asks the Gemara, a little bit more than 1/3 of the way down, how do we know the first din of our Mishnah? The first din of our Mishnah indicated that the Chachamim said that Ein Adam Yotze de Chovas B'Yom Tov Rishon B'Lulav Shel Chavero. I can't use your lulav on Yom Tov Rishon, and you can't use mine. So where do we know this from? Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught us a two-part drasha. We know, of course, the pasuk says Ulekachtem lachem b'Yom Rishon. Let's look at those first two words. Ulekachtem shetehei lekicha b'yad kol echad ve'echad. That every single person has an obligation to do this. You cannot be yotze with other people. Some of the Rishonim are very bothered by this. The Meiri in particular was bothered, like, yeah, we know that there are some mitzvahs that other people can be motzi you, but that's not most mitzvahs. By tefillin, by shofar, like shofar, someone's going to be yotzi you in one way because they're the Baal Tokeh and everyone is shomeya. But tefillin, other people can be motzi you. Sukkah, other people can be motzi. I'll be in the sukkah today. I'll have you in mind. Of course, that doesn't work. So he's bothered by this. He gives a whole vort here. Anyways, that's the first part of the pasuk. Halfway down on Memala from Adbezu Lekachtem, that every single person has an obligation to do the mitzvah themselves. And then here is the part that's the part that is convincing for our Mishnah. Lachem, when it says Lekachtem lachem, says the Gemara Mishalachem lahotzi es hashal ve'es hagazel, that on day one, that one who borrows a lulav and esrog, or one who steals a lulav and esrog, they are not yotze. And that is why the Gemara says, 4 lines into the new Gemara here, Mikan amru chachamim ein adam yotze de chavasa b'yom tov harishon shel chag v'lulavo shel chaveru ela im kein nostan lo b'matana. So that's the drasha that we see in the Brisa, and the Brisa ends with a couple of extra words that I cannot be yotze with your lulav and your esrog unless what? Unless I give it to you b'matana. Now, this is one of the introductions to a famous Shas Suggah called Matana Almanas Lahachzer. It's very clear that if I buy my lulav and esrog for $150 and you want to be yotzei, I'm happy to give it to you b'matana, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, and you're going to give it back to me when you're done. I spent some good hard-earned money on that. So we're going to learn about that Suggah tonight. But before we do, let's continue learning in the Brisa. The Gemara says a story. Umaysa b'Rabban Gamliel, v'Rabbi Yehoshua, v'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, v'Rabbi Akiva. Sounds like the Chevra, except the Rabbi Tarfon is missing from the famous story in the Haggadah. Shayubayin bisfina, they were on a boat. V'lo haya lulav ella leRabban Gamliel b'vad shelakhu be'elav zuz. And only Rabban Gamliel had a lulav and esrog that he had purchased for 1,000 zuz. So how can we make sure that he and all of the others can be yotze on Yom Tov Rishon? How they can all be yotze with a lulav and an esrog? So says the Gemara, Netalo Rabban Gamliel v'yatzabo. So he took the lulav and esrog and he was yotze. He did the mitzvah. Unasano Rabbi Yeshua b'matana. Then he handed it over with b'matana. He says, "Here, this is no longer mine. Now it's yours." Natala Rabbi Yeshua b'yatzabo. So he picked up the lulav and esrog and he did his bracha. He did the na'anuim. V'nasnu l'Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah b'matana. Then he passed it on to the next person. The dominoes are falling. Natala Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah b'yatzabo unasano b'matana l'Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah did the mitzvah and then he gave it b'matana to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva v'yatzavo. He as well did the same, and then v'hechzira l'Rabban Gamliel. Then he returned it to Rabban Gamliel. It says the Gemara, "Lamali l'meimar hechzira." Why did I understand all the matana parts? I understand that you can't be yotze unless I give my lulav to you b'matana. That I totally understand. But why do I have to give it back to you? Why did the Brisa say that Rabbi Akiva gave it back to Rabban Gamliel? Lamali l'meimar hechzira. So it says the Gemara, "Milsa agav orche kamash malan." We are learning a secondary rule from this Brisa. The primary rule that we're learning is, of course, that I cannot be yotze with lulav and esrog on day one unless it's mine or you give it to me b'matana. And the second thing is this idea of matana al manas lahachzir shma matana, and that's where we are 3/4 of the way down on the bottom of Mem Aleph from the base. That a matana al manas lahachzir. The reason why Rabbi Akiva was quoted as saying that he returned the lulav and esrog to its original owner, Rabban Gamliel, was to fulfill this. Was not so much to fulfill, but to teach us this halacha of matana al manas lahachzir shma matana. Says the Gemara. This also plays out in another area. This was all Tanaim so far. Now we're going to see some Amoraim. Kihada Amar Rava. Hey lach esrog. Here's an esrog zeh al manas shetachzirehu li. So I'm giving you an esrog that you can use on the condition that you give back to me. It's literally matana manas lahachzir. That's how he framed it out. The talavi yatzavo hechziro yatza lo hechziro lo yatza. Unbelievable idea. Hechziro yatza. If you give back the esrog, then you were yotze. But here's the crazy part. Lo hechziro. If you didn't give back the esrog, you broke the rules. The whole matana that I gave you was betnai that I get it back. So it almost seems backwards. I'm giving this item to you, So it's almost kind of free and clear in one way that you can be yotzei the mitzvah to the point that it's fully yours. But what we're seeing in the Gemara is not that way. The Gemara is saying that the returning of the item when we do a matana manas lahachzir is part of the condition of being yotzei the mitzvah. So if I take your lulav and esrog, you say, Phil, you can use this. I know you left yours day one. I don't know what you did with yours. You can use mine b'matana. So I'm holding it. Asher kiddushan b'mitzvah sav. Okay, turn the esrog over. Na'anu. Great. So then let's say I decide not to give it back to you. You gave it to me. It's mine. I have every right to keep it. So maybe you have every right to keep it, but you're not yotzei lulav and esrog. Because says the Gemara, hechziro yatsa. If you return it, you're yotzei, but lo hechziro lo yatsa. And therefore, we see the matana manas lahachzir has such strong teeth that it's not just that this theoretical loophole of giving you a matana works, but it's even stronger that even if you were to opt to keep it, which may be within your rights, you've undone the mitzvah that you did retroactively.
Is there like a time frame?
It doesn't.
Keeps it overnight and use it back the next day.
Well, in our case, they didn't return it. He gave it to the next guy.
Right. It's very interesting.
So actually,
No, not in the Rava case. Not in the Rava case. What you're saying is in the Rabban Gamliel case, it's true. It dominoed to other people. That's true. But in that case as well, the last line of Rabbi Akiva was Vechzir Rabban Gamliel. So what if Rabbi Akiva didn't give it back? By the way, guys 2, 3, and 4 in the middle didn't give it back to the first guy. They gave it forward. They passed it on. But the whole thing had to be with the mindset of Matana Manas Lahachzir, that Rabban Gamliel had to get it back. They all knew it. But it wasn't like you're seemingly implying that guy number one, back to Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel, you give again. Back to Rabban Gamliel. That would have made more sense according to this din, but that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara clearly implies, because it doesn't say, it says clearly what they did. They gave it to guy 2. Guy 2 gave it to guy 3. He didn't give it back to Rabban Gamliel, who gave it to guy 3, who gave it back to Rabban Gamliel, who gave it to guy 4. It didn't happen that way. So as long as, this is me talking, as long as it makes it back to the original guy, then 2, 3, 4 in the middle, no problem. But if it never gets back, then seemingly, the pshat in the Gemara would be that guys 2, 3, 4, and whoever else were not yotzei the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, because it's a matana al menas lahachzir. The whole matana of you getting the rights to that lulav is conditional on its return to its initial owner, even though you didn't have to be the one to give it back if there's a whole chain of people. Just very, very interesting. We wouldn't have thought. Balabatash. I wouldn't have thought that would have been the case. I would have thought they had to give it back to Rabban Gamliel. And then with Rava, it's even more explicit that if you don't give it back, you are not yotzei. Then says the Gemara, why did this little story with Rabban Gamliel have to say how much the esrog was? Says the Gemara, why? So says the Gemara, of course, it is well known that one is obligated, of course, to do mitzvos saseh, but that when it comes to mitzvos saseh, so one is obligated to give only up to 20%, only up to 20% of their, I don't know how the math works, but I'll say their livelihood. I don't know exactly, like, is it savings? I don't know all that stuff. Yeah, I figured out. But let's hope we're never in such a situation. But it was just common mitzvos chavivos saleh. Are you allowed to do more? Okay, all of these are good shilas. So that's why the Gemara went out of its way to say that it was be'elef zuz to show us that there was mitzvos chavivos saleh. Connected, but new sugya, or 4 lines from the wide lines, 5 lines from the wide lines on mem aleph from the base. Amar le mar bar amemar le Rav Ashi. When he said, my father used to daven with them in his hand. He used to hold the lulav and esrog during Shmona Esrei. That's interesting, because we all know from day school that you're not allowed to hold anything other than a sitter in your hand during davening. So says the Gemara, in line with that thinking, is Meisvei. Hold on one second. We have a Tanaic source that seems to question what he did over there holding it during Shmona Esrei. Lo yochaz adam tefillin biyado. One is not allowed to hold tefillin in his hand, with sefer Torah b'cheiko, or to hold in his against his chest, to hold a sefer Torah v'yispalel. We're afraid that it might drop. And as well, v'lo yashtin b'hen mayim. You can't walk into the bathroom holding tefillin. Below yishan bahen, you can't fall asleep. Below shenas keva, below shenas sarai, you might fall asleep and it might fall out of your hands. Amar Shmuel as well, of course. Sakin u'ke'ara, you have a knife or you have a bowl. Kikar u'mos, a loaf of bread or coins. Harei l'kayotze bahen, and all other things. We're afraid that they might fall. So why are you allowed to daven Shmona Esrei? Why are you holding a lulav and esrog? Doesn't make sense. Says the Gemara, first of the very long lines, Memalef from the base Hasam, over there, lav mitzvah ninhu, the tarid bahen, bahu. There, in all of those cases, you're not necessarily doing a mitzvah. Yes, you're holding tefillin, you're holding a Torah, Minei Ubei, you're not fulfilling one of the 613 commandments. But hacha, where you're holding the lulav and esrog, mitzvah ninhu v'lo tarid behu. There's no tirda. It's not a question of, are you afraid that you might drop the knife? Are you afraid that you might drop the tefillin? You're performing a mitzvah as it stands. And therefore, because there's no tirda, this is the halachic nuance, because there's no tirda of what you're holding and you're performing a mitzvah, therefore, seemingly, it should be mutter to do that. The Gemara embraces this. The Gemara embraces this idea that it seems to be totally mutter to hold the lulav and esrog. Tanya, just to show us the scope of what people used to do with their lulav and esrog, the Brisa writes as follows: Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok Omer, Kach hayam min hagan shel anshe Yerushalayim. This is what the elders of Yerushalayim used to do. Adam yotzim mibeso v'lulav biyado. He'd leave his house during any time on Succah, carrying his lulav and esrog. Holech lebeis hakneses lulav biyado. Walking to shul, he's got it in hand. Korei kriyas shema umispalel v'lulav biyado. He would say kriyas shema. He would be davening shmona esrei. Remember that tefillah, whenever referenced loosely, tefillah in Shas usually means shmona esrei. He would hold it in his hand. Korei bator v'nosei al kapav. However, if he was learning Torah or he was doing this yes kapayim manichu al gabe karka, there you have to put them down, because there you can become so immersed. Halavai, you can become so immersed in your learning that you're going to get distracted and it might fall, and that's not okay. If one has an obligation to do bikor cholim or to be menachem avel, lulavo biyado, he should be holding the lulav in hand. Nichnas lebeis hamedrash, if he's going in to learn. So here as well, so it says the Gemara, mishager lulavo biyad beno uviyad avdo viyad shlucho. He should send it home with someone. Let somebody else hold it. You're busy right now. My kamash malan. What does this brisa of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok teach us? Lehodiacha kama hayuzrizin b'mitzvos. It's a beautiful idea to see such a zriza, such a commitment to a mitzvah that you're not even willing to put it down. In many areas, there's a Musar Haskel for us. That's absolutely true, but we're coming upon the holidays relatively soon. It's a beautiful thing to walk around with a lulav and esrog. Rabbi Yossi Omer, very bottom line of Malachim and Beis, Rabbi Yossi Omer, that on Yom Tov, if you walk outside, that you're going to be pater if you carried out the lulav and esrog on Shabbos. And we said the reason why was because you were basically, as Rashi pointed out, you were ta'ah b'dvar mitzvah. So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, it was, as we turn to the top of Mem Beis Mid Aleph, lo shanu ela shelo yatzabo. The only time we say that one will be pater for carrying out a lulav and esrog is if they weren't yotze the mitzvah yet. Because remember, as Rashi said, what was the whole svara? You're involved in a mitzvah. What if you already yotze the mitzvah? Well, if you already yotze the mitzvah, so then no. Then I can't give you the loophole of saying that you're pater because you're not ta'ah b'dvar mitzvah. You were already yotze that day. And it's not like the mitzvah of tefillin that every second you wear your tefillin, you get another mitzvah. This is checking the box. You're done. The second you flip over the esrog, the whole thing is over. The moment has happened. It's occurred already. So if at 7 a.m. you are about to leave your house and you are so excited at your table, you take out the lulav and esrog upside down, bracha, turn it over, na'anuim, and then like that you walk to shul. Abaye says you don't get the heter, you don't get the leniency of no korban in that case. Lo shanu ela shelo yatzabo, aval yatzabo chayev. But had it been that you were already yotze the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, the halacha is you'd be chayev. Says the Gemara, what's the practicalities of this? Hamida agbehe nofakbe. The second you pick up the lulav and esrog, you're yotze. Remember we said it's a moment in time. It's not difficult to be yotze the mitzvah of lulav and esrog. So says the Gemara, and this is of course where we get our custom from of when we make the bracha, we hold it upside down. That's when you hold the esrog upside down, because when you hold the esrog upside down, you're not yotze. So if you were going to walk to shul like that on Shabbos, in order to be pater, you'd have to first not have done the mitzvah yet, and second of all, hold the lulav and esrog in a way where you're not yet yotze, which is holding the esrog upside down. And Rava, line 3, Mem Beis Mid Aleph, gives his own answer. Rava Amar afilu tema shelo havcho. Even if you're holding the lulav in the right, that lulav and esrog, each of them in the right direction, you would still be pater. Hacha b'mayaskin and kigon shehotzio b'kli. What are we talking about? This is what we do nowadays, where we walk around with a kli that holds the lulav and esrog. So says the Gemara, you can't say you're not yotze. Do you remember a couple of days ago, just a few blot ago, it was at the top of the Amud, the top of Lamed Tes, Lamed Ches, Lamed Zayin. Felt like yesterday. That what?
I remember this in Succah.
What a beautiful memory, David. Yeah. So says the Gemara that Rava says over here, the reason why you're still patur, you're not yotzei the mitzvah, you have the esrog and a kli. Perfect. That's our case scenario. Says the Gemara. That doesn't even make sense. Remember, 5 blot ago, Rava was of the opinion that if you take a sudar, you take a handkerchief, and you use it as a hefsek between your hand and the lulav, he says you're still yotzei because lekicha al yedei davar acher is shma lekicha. It's still considered ulakachtem lachem if you have gloves on. We still treat it the same if there's a sudar, if there's a handkerchief. So says the Gemara, how can Rava say over there that you're still yotzei lulav and esrog, but over here you're not because the esrog is inside its own box? Who cares if it's in its own box? Lakicha, what's the language of the Gemara? That it's lakicha al yidei davar acher shma lakicha. So he soser himself. So answers the Gemara, it's not a stira. Rava knows exactly how to answer this question. Rava explains 6 lines down, men beis med aleph, hani mili derech kavod. When we're taking the handkerchief and we're doing it because I need to hold it with a handkerchief for technical reasons, whatever, my hands hurt, I have a bruise, whatever it is. So that's why I'm holding the lulav and esrog with a sudar with a handkerchief. Fine, that's derech kavod, fine. But aval derech bizayon, no, you're going to be yotzei the mitzvah of lulav and esrog if the esrog is still in the box. Could you imagine someone taking their lulav and holding it in the box and bringing the lulav still in its case? Baruch atah Hashem. It's a bizayon. It's a bizayon. That's not how you do the mitzvah. So that's Rava's distinction. On-the-daf lamed zayin, where he said that you're allowed to use a sudar, that's derech kavod, and therefore over there that's lakicha. I keep forgetting the line. That is lakicha al yedei davar acher. That's still shma lakicha. But over here, it's a bizayon to do the mitzvah that way, to keep the esrog in the box. That's not right. That's not right. Okay, so that's where we are. We're 6 lines down on Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Amar Rav Huna. We're trying to continue the idea here of ta'abed dvar mitzvah. Amar Rav Huna. Omer haya Reb Yossi. Olas ha'o shenimtzeis bein agafayim. An ola, an animal that's an ola, is typically completely consumed. Let's say you have an olas ha'o, and it's mixed up with a whole bunch of birds. The kasavor, you thought chatas ha'ofi, the achla, pater. All right, so we know there's a lot of different types of birds that you can bring. If it's an ola, you're not allowed to eat it because it's kulo lashem. If it's a chatas, you are allowed to eat it. You thought that it was a chatas, so you ate it, but really it was an ola. Says the Gemara, your pater. Asks the Gemara, my kamash malan, Rav Huna, what kind of din are you teaching me from Rabbi Yossi? So says the Gemara, it must be the ta'abed dvar mitzvah pater. It must be that in this case of chatas ha'of, the reason why you're pater is because you thought it was chatas ha'of and really it was olas ha'of. You were wrong, but it was a ta'abed dvar mitzvah. So says the Gemara, but if that's true, then haynuhach. Then that case of the olas ha'of and the chatas ha'of is the same as our case of our Mishnah, mem aleph amud aleph. They're both ta'abed dvar mitzvah. Why are you giving me 2 mari makomos? I don't need to. That's extraneous. Real estate is important. We don't waste space. So why do we have 2 sources in the Tanaim that way? Says the Gemara, not so simple. 12 lines down. Mahu detema hasam hu de ta'abed dvar mitzvah pater hainu de'avad mitzvah. Because we could distinguish between the 2 cases as follows. In our Mishnah on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, we said you were ta'abed dvar mitzvah. You made a mistake with a mitzvah, and you were doing a mitzvah, or you were on your way to do a mitzvah. But here, says the Gemara, Aval Hacha, in the case of the olas ha'of that you should not have eaten, the ta'abed dvar mitzvah, the lo avad mitzvah, everything's done already. The animal was shechted already. There's no mitzvah that you're doing anymore. It's over. So imalo, I might have thought that in that case, we would not say that you're ta'abed dvar mitzvah pater. Kamash malan, that the latitude of ta'abed dvar mitzvah is very wide. Ta'abed dvar mitzvah doesn't just mean I have a mitzvah that's looming in front of me, like our Mishnah Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, but even one that is behind me, which is bringing the chatas over, olas ha'of in this case. And says the Gemara, in both cases we apply ta'abed dvar mitzvah as pater. That's why we needed 2 cases, one where the mitzvah was in front of me and one where the mitzvah was behind me. Says the Gemara, wait a second. We have a case that breaks all the rules. 1/3 of the way down, Mem Beis Amud Aleph, we have a question from the Tanaic source. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Hashochet es hatamid she'eno mevukar kihilchaso b'Shabbos chayav chatas v'tzarach tamid acher. We have a case scenario where a person was shechting a korban tamid and it was not mevukar. It was not checked properly. We know that we have a din. It's coming upon us, at least its application, is that whenever you are about to bring something behakrava, it has to be checked with at least 4 days of prep time. And we know that that's true. And that's why we are about to start in less than 2 weeks' time. We're about to start saying slichos. And when do we say slichos? We have to make sure that there's a minimum of 4 days between that Saturday night, and then Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night. We need a minimum of 4 days before Rosh Hashanah Kivakoras edro roetzom. We're walking in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have to have at least 4 days of slichos. The Sephardim have a whole different can of worms. If there are any Sephardim in the room, your son-in-law was that, right? That's a lot. They're already in the thick of it. Whatever, it's almost halfway through Elul. It's very early or very late. I think very early. Do they do late at night? I don't think so. Mostly early morning, right? Yeah. So it's very early. Anyways, we extracted, this is quoted in the Mishnah Brura and the halachos of Rosh Hashanah, that we need 4 days of prep time. So let's say that with this Korban HaTamid, you didn't do the 4 days of prep time. So why are you chayav v'chatas? Why are you chayav v'chatas? Why don't we say Tov b'dvar mitzvah? Manavshach. Whether you say that it's like our Mishnah or like the case of the birds, either way, if the mitzvah is behind us or in front of us, it doesn't make a difference. It's Tov b'dvar mitzvah. So we should say that you're pater. Why does this Mishnah, why does this brisa over here by the Korban HaTamid say that if you do so b'Shabbos, you're chayav v'chatas v'tzarech tamid acher? Why? We should at least say Tov b'dvar mitzvah and you're pater. So it says the Gemara, Amar le bar mina dehahi. You're absolutely right that that's a good question, but we have to exclude that case. Why do we have to exclude the case of the Korban HaTamid? Says the Gemara, Itmar Allah, because the Amoraim, when they learned that brisa, here's how they learned it. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Chatoi, Amar Rav Hamnuna Saba, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashian, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Kegon sheheviu milishka she'enan mevukarin. It's not that this animal wasn't checked. The whole room of animals wasn't checked, and you were irresponsible about it. That's totally different. That's not Tov b'dvar mitzvah. I thought it was mevukar and I was wrong. You went to a pen where every animal was unchecked. We're not covering your back on that one, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're not doing that. You're chayiv. That's your responsibility. You can't call that a Tov b'dvar mitzvah. You were irresponsible. So now we see a line in the sand. Tov b'dvar mitzvah can apply, of course, for mitzvah in front of us. That's our Mishnah Memalef Amal. Even in the case of Tov b'dvar mitzvah, where the mitzvah was behind us, they already brought the hakrava, the olas over the chatas, and you ate it as you thought it was a chatas, and you're wrong. Mitzvah was behind us, no problem. Tov b'dvar mitzvah. The case of the chatas, where all the animals in the room were not checked, and you want the leniency of Tov b'dvar mitzvah pater? No, there's a minimum responsibility. You got to do the basics, and then if you mess up, okay, we got you. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. We're not malach, and we make mistakes all the time. That's fine, but it's got to be a mistake. It can't just be pure irresponsibility. And that is how the Gemara distinguishes in the Succah of Tov b'dvar mitzvah. Halfway down, then base without. Where's what?
Sounds like it's amazing.
Maybe that's why the Gemara doesn't like, maybe, I don't know how far it goes. Like we have to get into the Rishonim. Is it a mazid mamish? Because let's say the animal is not a balmum. Let's say you lucked out. So you lucked out. But if the animal ends up having a mum and you did, I don't know, like we have to get into the details, but from the Gemara itself, the case itself, you did not do enough effort of checking it. But I would imagine, I'm saying this on my own, Hashem, forgive me if I'm wrong, that if you didn't do any bikur and the animal had no mum, is that animal kosher? I don't know. What is that? Okay. It could be that is it a mazid? Is it irresponsible? Is it karuv lemazid? Karuv lemazid, right? That's another language that we use. It's just irresponsible. Like you didn't do enough due diligence to check the animal. Halfway down. Mekabelas isha miyad bina umiyad baila umachzirto lemayim b'Shabbos. Husband and child come home from shul holding the lulav and esrog. The wife is allowed to accept it from them and put it back in its water on Shabbos. Rashi. Where's Rashi? Rashi is in the very thick lines of Rashi, about 4 lines down in the thick lines of Rashi. First one on the Mishnah. Dibur hamaschel mekabeles isha miyad beno baila. What is she accepting from them? Es lulavehen. Yeah. Velo amrinan kametalta lamidi dolochazi. Could you imagine in the home that for the husband and the son, where because it's a mitzvah to say shazman grama, women are exempt. So maybe for the men in the household, the lulav and esrog is not muksa, but for the women in the household, it's muksa because it's not shaykh by them. So the Mishnah says explicitly that it's not considered muksa by them. And then we're adding in another layer of conversation here of can you put it back in the water? Fine. So what do we see from here? What we see from here is very interestingly is that a woman does not have a din of muksa as it relates to a mitzvah that has nothing to do with her. Why? So some of the Rishonim here point out, was it Rashi? I think it's Rashi. Some of the Rishonim here point out because she in theory could do the mitzvah if she wanted to. No, it's not Rashi. I don't remember where I saw it. Tosfos say it. Someone writes this, I can't remember where, that because a woman is allowed to do a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, even though she's exempt, so therefore it's shaykh by her. Ledugma, women are not often mo'alim, but let's say my wife was trained and the baby's got 5 minutes till Shkia and it's Shabbos, and can she use the kalim? By me, is katsoy, because in my head, it's never muksa. It's always in my head available for Shabbos in case I need to do a bris. But what if my wife, do women do brisim? Not really. And I mean, there's a website, drmohelet.com here in Chicago. It exists. Yes. Yes, absolutely. There's certainly precedent, but it's not her chiyuv because the mitzvah itself is a daytime mitzvah. The Shulchan Aruch writes, then the Rama writes, if you do a bris at night, or if you do a bris before day 8, total zero in halacha. Total zero in halacha. You have to do a tafas dam bris in those cases. The poskim write that you don't make a bracha on tafas dam bris because there's a diun in the Rishonim if it's required, but the hatafas dam bris actually does work. I just got a phone call today from someone. We've decided we're doing the circumcision in the hospital. Would you mind doing hatafas dam bris? So I don't like those phone calls so much because that's not the way the Lord intended. We have 4,000 years of history. So I gave them the sales pitch and they said, does that work for you? So I'm very clear. I said, it's certainly not plan A. And I would like to entertain the possibility of doing it on time properly, but I don't make decisions for you, but plan A is to do it the right way, is to have a Sabbath observant mole, do the bris on time. And if that's something that you don't want to do, then okay, my hands are tied. I said a drop nicer, but not much nicer. So what's your concern? They said COVID. I'm like, you're probably less likely to get COVID at your house with me, who's vaccinated with no symptoms, and in a hospital that has a COVID unit. So I'm just saying, talk to your medical physician. Okay, anyways, let's get back to the Gemara. So that's what the Mishnah writes, that a woman doesn't have a din of muksa, and she's allowed to put the esrog back in not the esrog, the other 3 minim back in the water. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, on the note of putting things into water, b'Shabbos machziran, on Shabbos you can return it to water, b'Yom Tov mosifin, on Yom Tov you can add water, uvemoed machlifin, and during Chol HaMoed you should change the water. Good. Last din of the Mishnah. And the last din of the Mishnah, as we will see, is going to lead to this snowball of halachos that a child who knows how to be mina'aneh, who knows how to shake a lulav, he is chayav b'lulav. That's the din in chinuch. He's a child. So, okay, he's a child. We're going to discuss a lot of that right now in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Pshita, Ma'u detema hol v'isha la bas chiyuv.
Wait a minute. Isn't there a separate Isser for Shabbos though? Not Yom Tov necessarily, but we're putting a plant back in.
Mishnah says, first line of the Mishnah, Mekabelas isha miyad beno, miyad bailu, machzir to l'mayim be-Shabbos.
Right. So shouldn't that be Isser?
It's mutter. That's what the Mishnah writes. The Mishnah writes that it's mutter because you're not growing something from the ground.
What's Shelo Yichmosh, as Rashi says?
So the Shelo Yichmosh is so that it doesn't get ruined. It doesn't begin to become degraded. You were saying that's the distinction of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. Yeah. You can't draw water. Yeah, so David thinks that you're possibly thinking about adding water, which is something that seemingly is mutter on Yontif. That's the din of Rabbi Yehuda. It doesn't seem that there's a machlokes. I mean, I'm done from the Gemara. It doesn't seem that way, at least. Okay, so says the Gemara, Pshita, it should be assumed that a woman should not have any problems of muksa, because we might have thought that because an isha is la bas chiyuvahu, that she should not be makabel kamash malan, that's not true. I don't know what the Gemara's dialogue is a little strange. It doesn't add any new information. That was our Havamina. So it must be that it's actually mutter for her to do the mitzvah, and because of that, there's no problem. Katan hayodeh l'na'aneh. All right, let's dig into some chinuch shilos. Tanu Rabbanan, katan hayodeh l'na'aneh chay b'lulav. If a child knows how to be mina'aneh, then he's obligated in the mitzvah of lulav. Lihis atef. If he knows how to put on tzitzis, then chay b'tzitzis. Lishmor tefillin. If he knows how to take care of tefillin, aviv lokeach lo tefillin. His father's obligated to buy tefillin for him. Now again, this Gemara is not being robust and thorough. There's of course ancillary dinim to all of these, and certainly by tefillin, a person has to be shomer gufo, guf naki, when one is not allowed to pass gas, and the other halachos that apply as well. Yodea ledaber, once a child knows how to speak, aviv lomdo Torah v'kriyashma, he has to teach him Torah, and he has to teach him how to say kriyashma. Torah maihi, what is Torah? Rav Hamnuna Torah tzivalana Moshe morasha ki las Yaakov, famous preschool song that all of our children have probably learned. And kriyashma maihi, how much of kriyashma do you have to know? Pasuk rishon, we don't have to go crazy. Saying Shema Yisrael at bedtime, you're good to go. Hayodea lishmar gufo. If a person knows how to be shomer guf, here this is not talking about shomer guf like by tefillin. Rashi points out that a child who knows how to protect himself from tumas maga and tumas masa, which is considered things of the guf. So that's of course talking about the world of taros. So then ochlan al gufo taros, then we rely on him, his ability to to protect himself from tumas mago masa to itaros. What about lishmoras yada? We know our hands are shniyim otuma. So it says the Gemara, if a child knows how to protect his hands to never become tummy, then ochlan al yada of taros, and even if he touches things, you're allowed to eat them, no problem at all. Hayodeli shail, so a child who you can ask him a question and he'll give you the right answer. So then, as it relates to sveikos and tuma v'tara, we'll apply the general rule that we've seen throughout Shas a dozen times already, that birshus hayachid sveiko tame, birshus harabim sveiko tar, he's reliable enough. Hayodei lifros kappa, cholken lo truma beveis hagranos, that if there is a child who knows how to be lifros kappa, if he knows how to be mavarech kibir kas kohanim, he'll go up to duchen. So then in a public forum, you're allowed to give him truma. What is this talking about? Take a look at Rashi, 2 lines from the bottom. It's in the middle of the Rashi. In my version of the Gemara, the Oz V'Hadar, it's the last word on the line. And within that last Dibur HaMaschil, Umishe Yodea. Umishe Yodea lifros kapav uporis betzibur. Once a child knows how to be poris kapav, and he does so publicly, he stands up on the bima, he stands up by the Aron Kodesh and does the duchening. Then at that point, akol yodim shevi shtei searos. At that point, we know that he is reliable to do this mitzvah doraisa. He must be a gadol mamish, and he has shtei searos. He has 2 pubic hairs. She'en katan poris kapav. A child who's a katan can't be the only person. For chinuch, he can be one of the people. He can't be the only one doing that. Otherwise, that would be problematic. And therefore, because he's publicly a Kohen, therefore he can receive the food in public. Otherwise, as Rashi earlier said, he would have gotten the food one way or the other. They would have brought it to his home, but he couldn't get it in a public way until he was Poris as Kappa. And on the top of Mem Beis and Mem Beis, coming toward the end of the parak, if a child knows how to do shchita, so then you're allowed to eat his shchita. That's amazing. That only assumes that there's a gadol, that there is someone who is bar mitzvah, who is standing above him. Once a child is able to digest and to eat a kazayis of dagan, dagan here is defined, as Rashi highlights, as the chameshes minei dagan, barley, rye, oat, wheat, spelt. Browse is the acronym, easy to remember. Barley, rye, oat, wheat, spelt. If you've eaten any of those, then at that point, then the dirty diapers of that child, marchikin mitzoaso, umimeme raglav arba amos. Then in order to daven and do other things biktusha, you have to move dalet amos away from that diaper. Now, if you have a child who has yet to eat that kind of food, they're just bottle fed or they're nursing, then their diapers have no din of tzoah, and one is allowed to daven right there, right next to them. Unbelievable din. That is how we distinguish, only when they can consume dagan. So when I was in Smicha, we were discussing this again. One of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Daniel Mann, who was in Eretz Chemda, in Eretz Yisrael, he used to say, it's not dagan mamish. It's like once they start eating solid foods, at that point we treat tzoah like tzoah, and then you have to move away dalet amos. But the Gemara here adds in a very interesting distinction. Amar Rav Chizda, 4th line, Mem Beis Mud Beis, v'hu sheyachol la'ochlo b'chtei achilas pras. We only assume that his achila is actual solid food if he could eat it b'chtei achilas pras, and the amount of time that would be machayev him to, let's say, make a bracha achrona. Not that he would; he can barely talk. He's a little child. He's 3. But to eat a kazayis b'chtei achilas pras, let's call it a slice of bread within 9 minutes. So not every 3-year-old can do that. Not every 2-year-old can do that. Depends how big of a mouth you are, how good of an eater you are. Some kids gag more than others. So if they have yet to do so, if they can't consume food at that rate, so afal pi that they ate the volume of food, but the rate was too slow, so therefore that is not considered so. We still treat it like a child who has eaten no dagan whatsoever. Omar Rav Chia bereid Rav Yeva. What about a gadol who's of the same case scenario? Let's say you have a gadol who eats no grains. You have people who we have people like that in our world. They don't eat any of the barley, rye, oat, wheat, and spelt. Nothing. They don't eat anything year round like that. So their tzoah is not considered tzoah. How can that be? It says the Gemara, it is. Amar Rav Chia bereid Rav Yeva uvegadol. When it comes to a bar mitzvah age person, even though a person cannot eat that volume of the chameshes minei dagan in that time, he's still going to have his tzoah to be treated like tzoah to the point that one is obligated to be merachik dalet amos. The more das that a person gets, namely when you become a bar das, when you're no longer a katan, now you're old enough, then Yosef machov. Rashi says 4 lines before the end of the parak, machov masriach, then his tzoah is considered to be masriach, and at that point, no matter what, we treat him to be that way, implying, of course, that if you are a katan, even if you're 12 years old and you have some type of food issue, you cannot eat dagan at all, that it's not so. That's the implication of the Gemara. I'm not saying anything halacha l'maisa, but it does seem that way from the Gemara. Let's say that a person that a child is able to eat a kazayas of tzli, of roasted meat. So then in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, bimheira yibaneh, shochten alav es haPesach. At that point, that child is worth including in the chabura. Shene'emar ish lefi achla. As long as you can eat a kazayas, you're included. Rabbi Yehuda adds in a little bit of a caveat. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it has to be that he distinguishes between what is food and what isn't food. Not just that he can stuff it in his mouth and eat it, but he has to be able to look at a plate and say, this is food and this is not. What's the test? Ketzad says the Gemara, nost and lo tziror, v'zorko egos v'notlo. You give him a plate of food, he sees a rock, he's like, what's this doing here? Give me the goods. And he recognizes the difference. He has to be able to be machalik. We have distinctions like this in the poskim. For example, some poskim write that if you have a katan who doesn't know the difference between Shabbos and weekday, so then you left the light on in your bedroom, so you can hold that child in your arms standing next to the light switch and don't tell him what to do, but they can turn off the light switch. I spoke to Rav Reuben, if you remember the story, awful story in Harnof many years ago where there was that attack in the shul in Harnof. A bunch of people were unfortunately killed there. So Rav Reuben, I used to learn nights there, he said that it's mutter for a katan who cannot be machalik between Shabbos. He can't tell what day of the week it is. He doesn't know. So how old is that? It depends on your kid. Somewhere in the twos, maybe 3 if you're lucky, but somewhere in the twos usually. And similarly, that child has to say today is Shabbos and tomorrow's Sunday and then Monday. But a child who in the middle of Saturday is like, can I go to school? It's Tuesday. So that child is not. So similar distinctions here. He has to be able to be machalik between what is achila and what is not achila. He has to be able to say, this is a tziror and I don't want to eat it. And this is ochel, this is an egos and I want to eat it. We'll stop right here. Hadron Allah Lula Agazol Yiratzim. We should come back to this daf together in 7.5 years. Wishing you all a beautiful night.